When it comes to brand expansion, you got to believe it yourself.
Richard Rawlings, the larger-than-life star of Fast and Loud, has always lived life in the fast lane. Cars, fame, fortune, and controversy. But now, fans are in shock after the latest announcement that has left everyone saying one word. Goodbye. The man who once roared through life behind the wheel of a roaring engine has finally hit a stop sign no one saw coming. His sentence is final, and there's no turning back. For years, Richard symbolized the dream of turning passion into success. From his world-famous gas monkey garage to his wild adventures across America, he built an empire from scratch. But behind that confident grin and flashy lifestyle, there were cracks forming, personal battles, lawsuits, financial struggles, and the kind of emotional toll that fame never shows in front of the cameras. Those closest to him noticed a change. The once unstoppable force of energy had become quieter, more distant, almost like a man preparing to close a long, unfinished chapter. When the final decision came, fans couldn't believe it. "This can't be the end," one wrote online. But it is. The final sentence for Richard Rawlings has been written, not in court, but in life itself. What he's decided to walk away from has left everyone heartbroken. The truth behind this emotional goodbye is far more shocking than anyone imagined. Because this isn't just about fame or fortune. It's about the price a man pays when the spotlight fades, and the roar of the engine goes silent forever. Before the world knew him as the wild and fearless face of Fast and Loud, Richard Rawlings was just a Texas kid with oil on his hands and a dream in his heart. He didn't come from money or privilege. What he had was passion, grit, and an obsession with speed. In those early days, he spent every spare dollar and every sleepless night in garages, turning rusty frames into roaring machines. Cars were more than metal to him. They were pieces of art, pieces of freedom. When Fast and Loud first hit the screens, no one expected it to explode the way it did. Richard's charm, humor, and daredevil energy pulled millions of viewers into his world. Gas Monkey Garage became more than a business. It was a brand, a lifestyle, a symbol of rebellion and ambition. Richard had finally built the empire he'd always dreamed of. But with fame came the kind of pressure that can break even the strongest spirits. Behind the laughter and the loud engines, there were moments no camera ever captured. Endless business deals, internal conflicts, friendships turned cold, and a growing distance between the man and the dream that made him famous. As the show's popularity soared, so did the expectations. Richard was expected to keep topping himself. Bigger builds, faster deadlines, louder episodes. What viewers saw as excitement, Richard began to feel as exhaustion. People close to him say the changes were gradual but clear. His once unstoppable drive started to fade, replaced by something heavier, fatigue, maybe regret. He had chased success his entire life, but now, standing on top of the mountain, he found himself wondering if the view was worth the climb. Money and fame had given him everything he thought he wanted, yet taken pieces of his peace that he'd never get back. When the final season wrapped, fans assumed it was just another pause before the next big thing. But behind closed doors, Richard was facing something bigger than television contracts, a decision about his future. Years of non-stop filming, running multiple businesses, and living under constant public scrutiny had worn him down. He had built Gas Monkey into a legend, but the cost of keeping that legend alive had become unbearable. Rumors began to swirl, legal disputes, financial troubles, even health scares. Richard stayed silent through most of it, appearing calm and collected whenever the cameras found him. But those who knew him best saw the truth. He wasn't the same man who once shouted, "Let's do it, monkey style," with fire in his eyes. The weight of years, mistakes, and sacrifices had finally caught up to him. When the news broke that Richard Rawlings was stepping away, ending his involvement, closing a chapter that defined him, it sent shockwaves through his fans around the world. For some, it felt like losing an old friend. For others, it was the end of an era. But for Richard, it was something deeper, a sentence he had written for himself. Not a punishment, but a release. In a quiet statement that few expected, Richard said he wanted to focus on life beyond the cameras. It was a simple line, but behind it lay decades of struggle, triumph, and pain. He wasn't walking away out of defeat. He was walking away to find peace. The man who once defined himself by speed had finally decided to slow down. As his final words echoed through the hearts of his fans, "This is it. I'm done." The realization set in that this wasn't just a career move. This was goodbye. For a man who built his world on horsepower and hard work, saying goodbye wasn't easy. But sometimes, the hardest road a man takes is the one that leads away from everything he's built. Richard Rawlings' sentence is final. The fast lane is behind him, and what lies ahead is uncertain. Yet for the first time in years, maybe that's exactly how he wants it to be. When the cameras stopped rolling and the echo of roaring engines faded, Richard Rawlings found himself in a silence he hadn't known in years. For more than a decade, his life had been defined by noise, the grind of the shop, the pressure of deadlines, the laughter of his crew, and the constant hum of attention. But now, all that was gone. What remained was something unfamiliar: stillness. For the first time, there were no producers calling, no fans crowding his shop, and no sponsors demanding results. It was just Richard, a man who had built an empire out of passion, now standing at the edge of it, wondering what it all truly meant. The world knew him as the confident leader of Gas Monkey Garage, the man who never slowed down. But those closest to him say that once the lights went out, he finally allowed himself to feel everything he'd been running from. He spent long nights alone, revisiting memories of the early days. The smell of gasoline, the sound of wrenches hitting the floor, and the excitement of a fresh build. Those were the moments that made him fall in love with the craft. Somewhere along the way, the fame, the money, and the endless expectations had clouded that love. He realized that in chasing the dream, he had lost sight of why he started. But the world didn't stop talking. Fans flooded social media with messages of heartbreak and gratitude. "Thank you, Richard, for inspiring us," one fan wrote. Another said, "You taught us that with hard work, even the wildest dreams can come true." The outpouring of emotion surprised him. For years, he had believed that people only cared about the cars, but now he understood. They cared about the man behind them, too. Richard slowly began to rebuild his life away from the spotlight. Instead of massive TV productions, he focused on smaller, personal projects, the kind that reminded him why he fell in love with cars in the first place. He spent more time traveling, reconnecting with old friends, and investing in new passions that had nothing to do with fame. The man who once lived for chaos was learning to appreciate calm. There were moments of reflection, too. Moments where he admitted to himself that walking away had been harder than any challenge he'd faced on camera. The identity he had carried for so long, the Gas Monkey King, the TV icon, had become his armor. Without it, he had to rediscover who Richard Rawlings really was. Friends say he changed. He smiled more genuinely. He talked less about ratings and more about real life, about family, about peace, about meaning. He admitted that he had made mistakes, hurt people, chased numbers instead of happiness, and ignored his health for too long. The sentence he had given himself to walk away and start over was not a punishment, but a second chance. In interviews that followed months later, Richard's tone was different. Gone was the wild spark of the man who thrived on adrenaline. In its place was something deeper: gratitude. "I've done it all," he said quietly in one conversation. "I've built the dream, lost parts of myself in the process, and now I just want to live. Not for the cameras, for me." That statement resonated with millions. In a world obsessed with fame and noise, Richard's decision to step back was seen as an act of courage. His fans, though heartbroken, began to understand that sometimes the greatest victories happen off-screen. Gas Monkey Garage still stands, a monument to the man who dared to dream, but its doors no longer echo with the same chaos they once did. Instead, it's a symbol of everything Richard achieved, and everything he chose to leave behind. As the sun sets over Texas and the engines grow quiet, Richard Rawlings finally lives at his own speed, slow, peaceful, and free. The fast lane may have defined his past, but it no longer controls his future. His sentence was final, but his story is far from over, because sometimes saying goodbye isn't the end. It's the beginning of something real. After stepping away from the noise, Richard Rawlings began to rediscover something he hadn't felt in years: peace. For so long, his life had been a race with no finish line. Every time he crossed one milestone, another appeared on the horizon. Success had become an addiction, and the spotlight had turned into both a blessing and a burden. But now, without the glare of fame, he was finally able to see life in its truest form. He often woke up early, before sunrise, and sat quietly with a cup of coffee, watching the Texas sky turn gold. No phone calls, no deadlines, just silence. For the first time, he could hear his own thoughts without the constant roar of engines. He also reconnected with the people who had been part of his early journey: old friends, mentors, even rivals. Conversations that once would have turned into business deals were now just genuine catch-ups. There was no longer any need to prove anything. The man who once thrived on speed had finally learned to slow down and simply live. Fans who met him at small local events or car meets described him as different. Gone was the untouchable TV personality. In his place stood a man more human, more open, and far more grounded. He laughed more easily, posed for pictures without the rehearsed grin, and listened to people's stories as if each one mattered. For Richard, this was redemption, not in front of cameras, but within himself. He didn't need another show or another record-breaking deal. What he needed was peace, and now he had it. Still, there were moments of nostalgia. Sometimes, when he walked past the old Gas Monkey garage sign, memories would flood back. The laughter of his team, the long nights before big builds, the thrill of unveiling a finished car. He missed those moments, but not the chaos that came with them. The past was part of him, but it no longer defined him. When asked in an interview what message he wanted to leave for his fans, Richard paused for a long moment before answering. "Don't let success be the thing that breaks you," he said softly. "Dream big, but never forget who you are when the lights go out." Those words summed up his entire journey. A man who had built an empire from nothing, faced the darkness behind fame, and found his way back to light. His story wasn't about engines or television anymore. It was about growth, forgiveness, and rediscovering the value of simplicity. As he looks toward the future, Richard Rawlings no longer measures life in horsepower or headlines. He measures it in peace, in purpose, in the quiet joy of knowing he lived it all, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. The fast lane may have been his world once, but the slow lane has become his home. The man who once chased every dream now understands that sometimes the greatest dream is just finding yourself again. Richard Rawlings' sentence may have been final, but his redemption, his peace, and his legacy will live forever. Time has a way of softening the noise, of turning fame into memory and memory into legacy. For Richard Rawlings, that legacy is carved not just in steel and chrome, but in the hearts of millions who grew up watching him chase dreams at full throttle. Though the roar of the engines has long since faded, the spirit of Gas Monkey, and the man who built it, continues to live on in a way few could have imagined. Even after his goodbye, people still gather around screens, rewatching old Fast and Loud episodes as if reliving a piece of history. They smile at the wild builds, the challenges, the laughter, and the chaos that made the show unforgettable. But more than that, they remember the man who made it all possible. A man who taught the world that passion can turn into purpose if you have the courage to chase it. Richard's story has become something much bigger than entertainment. It's a reminder that success isn't just about what you achieve, but about what you overcome along the way. He faced critics, financial hardships, and personal loss, yet he never stopped pushing forward. And even when he finally decided to step away, he did it with the same courage that got him started. He didn't let failure define him. He defined his own ending, Across the world, fans began organizing car meets and charity drives under the Gas Monkey name, not for publicity, but to honor the man who inspired them. Some rebuilt their first cars because of him. Others started small garages in his image. Everywhere, the legacy of Richard Rawlings became a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. In his quiet moments now, Richard doesn't measure his worth by how many episodes he filmed or how much money he made. He measures it by the lives he touched. Letters still arrive from fans who say his story changed theirs, from mechanics who found purpose to dreamers who refused to give up. To them, Richard wasn't just a TV personality. He was proof that ordinary people could build extraordinary lives. He once said, "If I can do it, so can you." And those words continue to echo through the car world. They've become a motto for anyone who's ever dared to start with nothing and aim for everything. But his legacy isn't just about cars, it's about courage. The courage to start when the odds are against you. The courage to keep going when the road gets rough. And most of all, the courage to walk away when your heart tells you it's time. The decision to leave it all behind, once seen as an ending, now feels like a masterstroke of wisdom. Richard showed that life doesn't end when the spotlight dims. Sometimes that's when it truly begins. Away from the cameras, he found the peace that years of fame had stolen from him. And in that peace, he found something even greater: meaning. Today, when people mention his name, it's not with sadness. It's with respect. They don't just talk about the cars he built. They talk about the man he became. Richard Rawlings transformed from a wild dreamer into a living legend, not because of what he gained, but because of what he gave back. Gas Monkey Garage still stands tall, a silent monument to his vision. Its walls carry the memories of laughter, long nights, and roaring engines that changed the face of automotive television forever. Visitors still walk through its doors, feeling the energy he left behind, a legacy that refuses to die. And if Richard could leave one last message for his fans, it would be simple yet profound. Don't be afraid to live fast, but never forget to live true. Because when the engines stop, the only thing that matters is who you became on the ride. Those words define him. Not the fame, not the show, not the noise. Just the man who dared to dream, lived without fear, and found peace in the quiet after the storm. Richard Rawlings' sentence may have been final, but his legacy? That will roar on forever, louder than any engine, stronger than any fame, and eternal in the hearts of those who believed in him.